But on the other hand, you do have another set of Democrats who feel like this is the empire striking back, that there was a momentum that was real, that was a movement that had been hard won, and it's now just being crushed by a consolidation among establishment Democrats.
So what you just heard there was Van Jones on CNN last night, wondering if Joe Biden's surge has an element of empire strikes back against Bernie Sanders. He was also suggesting that some people may be relieved to see the Democratic Party unifying around Joe Biden, or indeed anyone, because they want a strong front against Donald Trump. But he's also worried that what's happened over the last 72 hours has been a unification of all the neoliberals, Beto, Buttigieg, Klobuchar, Jim Clyburn, many others around Joe Biden because they feared the movement Bernie Sanders was building. That it wasn't a genuine feeling that they all loved Joe Biden and this was the right time to endorse him, but this was a rash and desperate move to pick the one guy that could stop Bernie Sanders, even if they didn't think Joe Biden would be a good president, even if they didn't think that Joe Biden would be a better president than Bernie Sanders. This was about the preservation of the Democratic Party establishment empire. And Van Jones doesn't really pick a side, but I think he articulates how a lot of Bernie Sanders supporters are feeling today. Look, this isn't a rigging. This doesn't break any rules. This is very different than superdelegates. If the neoliberal candidates want to unite behind somebody and that convinces voters to unite behind that person, then like it or not, that's the game. Joe Biden has built some momentum from coalescing the anti-Bernie voices in the party, the people running, but also the senators and Congress people that are anti-Bernie Sanders. This isn't a rigging, but it does show that the party is willing to pick an objectively inferior candidate like Joe Biden, who has alienated tons of people, maybe none more than young voters, all because they don't want Bernie Sanders. And I've noted this on the channel. This isn't at all driven by any credible evidence that Bernie would lose to Trump or would be more likely to lose to Trump or anything like that. They might tell you that. They might say that they're picking Joe because he'll win the down ballot races and he'll beat Trump and Bernie Sanders won't. That's not the case here. Even if Bernie Sanders was clearly, objectively the best candidate versus Trump, the data shows that both Bernie and Biden pull well against Trump. But even if Bernie was far and away the best on that result, they would still pick Biden, and they would have done it in the exact same way. They would have rushed behind him right after South Carolina, and they would have all endorsed him and build this narrative, helped by the media, the empire striking back against Bernie Sanders and against the young people of all races, of all backgrounds, that have put so much faith and hope and optimism and love and passion into this movement to build a better society, because those young people need to be put in their place. That's what the Democratic Party is saying, that the young people can't be allowed to have their choice represent the party. In the election in November, win or lose, we want the young people to lose either way. We want them to have a choice between Donald Trump, who objectively is one of the worst presidents in modern history, or Joe Biden, a man who has promised so little to young people and a man who has multiple times in recent history basically mocked the systemic struggles and inequalities that millennials and Gen Z people face right now regarding housing, education, wages, job security, paucity of benefits, health insurance, and all of those sorts of things. Biden has mocked young people, not shown sympathy or solidarity with them. And so they're saying to those young people, we're going to build behind Biden because we don't want your democratic socialist vision to have any chance at winning. Because if Bernie wins, and Bernie can win, Bernie can beat Trump, then we lose. The empire loses. If Biden wins, we win the biggest amount. If Trump wins, we're maybe not elated, but we're not devastated. But if Bernie wins, the elites that undergird the media, right-wing media and corporate centrist media, as well as the forces that undergird the Republican and Democratic establishments, will be terrified if Bernie Sanders wins. That's why the Empire is uniting in this way at this moment. And we have some breaking news that even Michael Bloomberg, the man who stuck it out on Super Tuesday and had a bad result, except for American Samoa where he won, is dropping out. And he's not only dropping out, but he's endorsing Joe Biden. And he's going to throw his effectively unlimited amounts of money behind Joe Biden via super PACs and other means to give Biden an immense advantage over Bernie in the rest of this race. And with a view to defeating Donald Trump, yes, but largely with a view to ensure that Joe Biden knows his place. And that even if Joe Biden was considering the most modest left-wing reforms, Michael Bloomberg will basically have him bought and paid for, and Joe Biden couldn't even be trusted to do the bare minimum for young people, for marginalized people, for working class people, because now more than anyone else, he is going to be bought and paid for by Bloomberg. That's the Empire striking back. Even Elizabeth Warren right now, she has indicated that she's leaning towards dropping out. Last night, it looked like she wanted to fight until the next round of primaries, the next 6 states. But right now, it looks like she's reassessing her campaign, which is exactly what Bloomberg said about 12 hours before he eventually dropped out. But it's not necessarily clear if she'll endorse anyone or if she'll even endorse Bernie Sanders. Maybe she stays neutral. Maybe she endorses Biden. I don't know what Warren's going to do because Warren isn't willing to challenge the Empire. Warren, in many ways, more than we thought before, is part of that empire. She's part of the Empire striking back against Bernie and his movement of young people. But at the very best, Warren has never been part of the Empire, but never been willing to challenge it. Warren was Bernie's ally back in the 2014, 2015, 2016 timeline, but when Bernie wanted her to challenge the Democratic status quo, she never did. She showed deference and loyalty to the Democratic Empire and never raised her voice against Hillary Clinton and the powers that be, never backed Bernie Sanders, never took up the challenge herself. Right now, what we're seeing, it's all within the rules of the game. There aren't any rules being broken here. If Biden ends up winning because of this, then like it or not, he's the justly earned nominee. But it still stinks in a lot of ways because it really does seem like everyone's coming together not to pick the best candidate, not to pick the one they all love and believe in, but to stop Bernie Sanders and to stop his diverse, progressive, young movement. That's what hurts a lot of people. And there's going to have to be some bridge building if Biden does become the nominee because he is tremendously weak with a lot of these populations. And if you want their support, if you want their votes, if you want their money, if you want their volunteer hours, you're going to need to build those bridges. And Biden has shown no ability or willingness to give a damn about young people most of all. This race isn't over yet. The delegate math is very close. Right now, Biden has about a 60-70 delegate lead over Bernie Sanders, but that's shrinking as more and more of the California vote gets added to the tally. And while Biden has emerged as the new frontrunner, Bernie Sanders has the real opportunity to highlight like never before the fundamental distinctions between him and Joe Biden. And if he can do that successfully, if Liz Warren at least gets out of the way and doesn't endorse Joe Biden, then Bernie Sanders has the opportunity to turn this race around and win it. But Van Jones was 100% right. While a lot of the powers that be in the Democratic Party were relieved to see unity in the anti-Bernie Sanders camp, for a lot of us, for a lot of young people, for a lot of progressives, it really seemed like, fair based on the rules or not, the party wasn't uniting for Joe, but against Bernie and against young people.